Hey everybody. It's the guy that was supposed to introduce me. We went to the bar, so I'm just going to get started. I get to do the last presentation before we let out for happy hour. So I promise you probably will not, there's nothing revolutionary in here or proprietary. So, and don't ask me any really tough questions at the end because I'm just going to run off the stage. So I'll introduce myself. I'm Bryan Kissinger. I'm the Vice President and Chief Information Security Officer at Banner Health. I came after the 2016 breach. I always caveat that. And previous to that, I was at Sharp Healthcare in San Diego, Kaiser Permanente, did some consulting, and I was a Navy officer for 7 years. So that's me. Now let's go around the room, and we'll start right here. All right, let's jump into it. All right, so we're going to talk about, I promise, there's only 10 slides, so I think it'll be pretty easy. We're going to align on what an endpoint is. We're going to talk a little bit about the risks, which we pretty much all know. What are some of those common attack vectors? What is endpoint security? What are we talking about? What works? A little bit around forensics and emerging technologies, and then I'll take a couple questions at the end. Sound all right? Let's jump in. Okay. Well, I'm not a big definition guy, but I also think that sometimes, we might be talking apples and oranges. So from whatis.com, one of my little favorite search things, it's an endpoint device that is connected to a network, and it consists of laptops, computers, tablets, smartphones, POS terminals. Pretty much it's everything. Everything is an endpoint at some point. What are the risks? Well, certainly service brand and disruption. There have been some really big fines and penalties out there, especially in our line of work. The federal government is very aggressive at making sure that we're protecting patient information, and we take it very seriously. Honestly, though, it's not a balance sheet item for us. We're not necessarily worried about paying some fine. It's this brand and reputation disruption that we worry about most. Identity and financial theft, obviously, and data theft. So every security person will probably tell you about the onion model and how data is at the core of that onion. And so we build concentric circles and layers of security around that data. So where does that data reside? A lot of things are moving to the cloud. A lot of things are going off endpoints, but we can't take our eye off the ball with endpoints because until all of us use dumb terminals or thin clients with no residual data, these endpoints typically have a lot of data on them. So some of the common attack vectors, unpatched system vulnerabilities, misconfigurations. People always ask me, what keeps you up at night? What keeps you up at night? And honestly, I'm less worried about a nation state attack. I'm not super worried about phishing emails, to be honest with you. There's a lot of good technology out there that's helping with phishing. I'm worried about us as humans making mistakes, putting vulnerable systems internet facing, or deploying endpoint devices that are misconfigured, unpatched, don't have the right technology on them to protect them. So that's really the thing I am most worried about. Phishing and ransomware, though, they're still out there. I get a note forwarded to me pretty much every week from our CFO, saying that our CEO is trying to tell him to wire money to some bank, and so it's a daily battle. And unsecure networks. So all of these endpoints, their entry into your corporate network is via your Wi-Fi or via a jack in the wall. And if your endpoint is connecting via an unsecure connection, then everything that it gets to is going to be vulnerable. All right, so what's endpoint security? So I chose another search engine here for this, because if I could just spout it out, but it won't be as authoritative as Webipedia. So endpoint security refers to the methodology of protecting the corporate network when accessed via remote devices. Again, laptops, wireless, mobile. Every device with a remote connection to the network creates this potential entry for security threats. So in other words, securing everything that touches your network. So what works? So some of the techniques that mitigate risk these are oldies but goodies. I'm still surprised today when I see things in the news about a laptop stolen out of somebody's car and it wasn't hard disk encrypted. I just can't believe that still happens, but it does. So just a low-tech, full disk and device encryption is a great risk mitigation technique. In fact, when we lose laptops at Banner, we really don't even worry about it because everything is hard disk encrypted and we just write it off as an asset loss. But we don't do a big investigation. We don't have any reporting requirements or anything like that. So an oldie but a goodie. Keeping the software up to date is super important. Many of you probably use things like network access control and other facility controls to make sure that devices that connect to your network are patched, they're up to date, they have some sort of anti-malware, antivirus solution on them. And then don't allow local administrator accounts for your typical end users. We've done a pretty good job. We have about 60,000 employees, and about 500 or 600 have admin, and they're mostly IT people. But the regular accountant or doctor or someone out there, they don't have any local admin access rights. Data loss prevention agents and browser isolation. Who knows what browser isolation is? All right, not that many people actually. Okay. Well, data loss prevention, we all know what that is. We use data loss prevention on endpoint, on the network, and in email. So we're covering those 3 layers with DLP technology. Browser isolation is a relatively new technology. Frankly, I got introduced to it about 2 years ago. And it's where every session of a browser session is actually isolated in the cloud. And so when I first got to Banner, the CEO told me he wanted to shut off personal email. And I said, wait, we're going to have people with pitchforks and torches, at our doors if we don't allow people to access Gmail and Yahoo and do all these great things. I said, let's try and think of a creative solution to allow that to keep working. So you open up a Gmail web session, that whole session can be isolated in the cloud. And so things like attachments downloading, links in emails, uploading or extracting of data, all of that can be controlled via this isolation technology. And if you want some names, I'll tell you, offline. But it's pretty good stuff. It's pretty easy to set up. And really, the reason why I'm not so concerned about phishing anymore is that this technology actually rewrites these links and hosts all of that in the cloud. And so you can't even enter credentials into a phishing link with this technology enabled. Oh, I'm pressing the wrong button. Okay. Backups to allow for a restore. So everyone will tell you that ransomware, the best antidote for ransomware is just having a clean, isolated set of backups. Now, we don't personally back up endpoints like laptops at Banner because it would just be too much of an administrative nightmare to do, frankly. But a lot of financial services companies do it. If you have a lot of IP and you have a lot of development happening on endpoint, it's a really good idea to back up all of that information, not just your files, but the whole OS and everything else that's running on there. A few more things. Anti-malware, obviously, protection, detection, response. This part of the tech industry and security industry has really come a long way recently. We actually changed out a legacy provider at Banner and added in one of these brand new, sexy endpoint detection and response technologies, and it's been very, very successful. In fact, we ran both the old technology and the new technology side by side, and out of the box, unconfigured, the new technology that we implemented actually caught 7 out of 10 indicators of compromise right away, and the old product was catching 1 to 2. So come a long way in this space. Again, if you want to have an offline conversation about that, I'd be happy to talk with you. Really impressive technology. Network access control rules, I mentioned this a little bit earlier. You don't want people coming into your conference room, jacking in, and having broad visibility of what's happening in your network. Many of you probably work in complex, decentralized organizations. We actually do these rules based on the facility. So it's really easy to lock down the corporate headquarters because there shouldn't be any reason somebody should be coming and jacking in a laptop that we don't know about. And if we block them, no one's going to die at the corporate headquarters. Now, out at hospitals, we have a different policy because things like infusion pumps and carts with laptops on them and things, they tend to move around a lot, and they tend to go up and down floors and plug into different places. The other thing is we don't want to turn off a device or block a device that might be impacting patient safety. Mobile application management, MAM, and mobile device management. So we're actually doing both of these at the moment at Banner, and we're doing a side-by-side test, and we may ultimately end up offering our end users either solution. So in case you don't know, mobile application management is containerizing just the applications that you want to protect on the device. And this is really good for BYOD devices. There's a lot of pushback that we get from people about, well, I don't want Big Brother sitting on my iPhone, and so we can just isolate specific applications on the device and leave the rest of your device alone. Others prefer to have complete mobile device management, and one of the things that we learned with the application management is that you actually have to be a bit more restrictive because you have to prevent the cutting and pasting or the moving of information from the app that you're protecting to the rest of your phone. Perfect example is if you're in your calendar and you want to hold and copy an address and move it into an email, another email, or to your Gmail or something, a mobile application management solution will most likely prevent that. And so that bothers some people, whereas the mobile device management solution allows you to move everything around that you want on the smart device or your tablet. And discipline configuration management. Again, this is the one that keeps me up at night. This is the one where, well, we left that service running and we didn't realize that we needed to harden that device. So I really worry about configuration management and making sure that as we deploy technologies and as we do images out to different devices, that we have a really secure baseline that we use. And we make sure that before any new image or new device goes out, that we have had it go through various phase gates and we've checked it out and given it seal of approval. So a little bit about forensics. Breach, HR, legal, these type of investigations are really most effective on the endpoint. We have all this great technology and logging information and all of this, but really when it comes down to understanding if there was a breach or you're trying to do some sort of investigation, you've got an employee that's doing something that they shouldn't be doing, you really have to be able to get to them on endpoint. And so the ability to run or load at will forensic agents onto endpoints will greatly enhance your investigation and the quality of data that your forensics team is going to be able to access. So some emerging technologies, what's gaining traction now, we talked about some of them. Not super new, but application whitelisting, the ability to say this device is only running these applications and these applications are allowed to do X, Y, and Z. And then everything else by default is not allowed to happen. So if you're very granular in that sort of policy, you can get a high degree of security. It is a little bit of a maintenance overhead, so be prepared for that. You probably don't want to application whitelist everything in your organization, but in our world, it's things like our electronic health records, some of our financial systems, and things like that. Application containerization, that's a mouthful. I can't believe I actually got that out. This is the process of taking that application and building a fence around it. It's putting it, we actually call it the garden. So we put things into the garden. And so we are containerizing those applications and protecting them from whatever else is happening on the endpoint. And then browser containerization, similar concept to web isolation. It's where you're actually taking that browser and you are putting it in a garden and you're protecting it, and what can come in and what can go out via that browser is actually completely protected by the container that it's in. See, I told you it wouldn't take that long. Any questions? Anything? Yes, sir.
Everything that you shared makes makes a lot of sense. We are doing some, not all, of what you're talking about. At what do you have a security governance model that is the baseline and the standardized policy that you build these practices on top of?
Yeah, good question. So we actually have 17 information security policies, and then we have a set of standards that reside below them. Our policies are not books. They're about 5 pages at the most, and we try and keep them high level. So that is the governance part from a policy perspective, and then when we are getting more granular, we take them down into standards and other documents. In addition to that, we've gone out and done different golden image standards. So if you're running a Linux, 10.0.5, this is how we expect you to configure that operating system. Same thing for Windows, same things with other flavors of Unix. And so for every type of build that we have a standard configuration that they're supposed to follow. Yes? Yeah, it's a good, really good question. To be honest, we've had a pretty good inventory system for our biomedical devices. We haven't done a lot in the security space. We're just now getting ready to implement one of these biomedical IoT device risk policy tool sets. And there are a bunch of them out there, but essentially they inventory, so they know everything that connects, whether it's an IoT device, a pump, or whatever. And they know exactly what kind of device it is, they know its build, they know its manufacturer, and then from there it can highlight whether that pump, there's actually a lot of great information you can get. It tells you if there's a recall on it, it tells you when the last maintenance was done on it, so there's a lot of great operational things you get from these tools, but it will also identify, hey, how old is this operating system? I don't know about you guys, but we have medical devices that are run by Windows XP. Still, and you can't just throw a bunch of emerging technology security solutions on them because they won't work, and then somebody's in a CT scan and it stops processing. So we're going to put that technology in here in the next couple of months, and just to have awareness. And so it's at the end of the day, those types of devices, you either have to use network access control or segmentation to protect them. And I said, no matter how fancy the tools are, at the end of the day, you either are going to upgrade that operating system, you're going to segment it somehow, and you're going to monitor it. I mean, those are really the only things you can do, because the life cycle of biomedical devices and things like that are like 20 years. So some of these things are running on really, really old operating systems, and there's not much you can do about it. We haven't had so much of the, Fitbit and, all these other like little smart device things yet, but we're expecting to use that technology to do the same thing, and network access control. Yes?
What are some things you're doing around monitoring and monitoring and enforcing compliance to your standards?
Yeah. Another great question. So we do ad hoc and continuous vulnerability scanning. And so we pick different IP ranges, and we actually run scans, and we're able to tell if there are devices that are out of compliance or not. We're fortunate, we have one image for our entire company. So it makes it easy to understand if that device is not following the standards or not. Where you have multiple images, that can, I think, be a little bit more tricky. But so there's pros and cons to all of that. But we mostly, I would say, through vulnerability scanning, and then other security agents that we have running on the endpoint will check in. We use a big log aggregation platform and SIM, and they'll check in and tell us if they're out of compliance as well. Others? Yes, sir. So I don't really think about it differently, to be honest with you, because I don't know that we can necessarily control where that endpoint device is going to go. I mean, somebody might take their laptop to Vietnam on vacation with them, and they need to be able to connect into the network. And so, if anything, I try to keep it simple and apply the kind of high bar of security to everything. whether it's connecting internally or externally. Now, whether you're accessing internal resources in a data center versus cloud, certainly. We're doing a lot. We're one of the first healthcare organizations to have a partnership with Salesforce, and we're actually replicating our electronic health record in the cloud in Salesforce, which is frightening. But the devices that are going to access that information are very, very hardened, and we're using things like browser containerization, application containerization, and some others to make sure that anything that's either going out to or coming back from a publicly facing site are really hardened. Yes, anyone else? Yes?
You add so many controls, right, on your end user devices. What's the sentiment of the users? I could see them going nuts.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're absolutely right. There is certainly agent fatigue out there. The con of having one image is that my laptop, has the same image as a clinical workstation, and so for me, I don't need all of these things loading up on my computer, and I'm sure that the clinicians and others feel the same way. They probably don't need some of the administrative things that we have. So I think there is fatigue. Every vendor tells you that their agent is like 1 kilobyte, and it's not going to affect your performance whatsoever. What I'm trying to do personally is rationalize. I do run a separate DLP agent versus an anti-malware agent. They're two agents, but they are pretty lightweight. But other than that, we don't have a lot of other administrative tools that are running out there. So it's a recognition, but we haven't seen it as a problem yet. Anything else? Yes, sir.
You mentioned you're doing DLP-based networking based. How sophisticated have you gotten with DLP rules? You're dealing with PII, that's simple stuff, but there's business-specific sensitive data that you need to customize the business has to give you.
Yeah.
And that's been a big challenge for a lot of companies.
Yeah, as we moved to Office 365, we actually enabled a data classification and tagging technology in Office 365. So all of our emails and all of our Office documents are capable of being classified by the end user. And so it's just a click. Like, in fact, I think I got stripped off of here, but I had confidential, on the bottom of this this PowerPoint. And so then our DLP rules are pretty sophisticated. They can actually read how that document or that email has been classified and then take automatic action. We haven't gotten to the point where we're forcing data classification, but we are scanning at the email gateway and other web gateway proxy areas for anything that would trip a DLP rule. We also are scanning for credit card information and everything you can think of. The reason why I swapped out DLPs when I got to Banner was that I wasn't happy with what we had. It wasn't very granular and it wasn't working very well. The product we have now, we really like. It's a market leader, and it's been a really good implementation. Anything else? All right, well, I thank you all very much. The bar is that way.